De-evolution. De-evolution theory, as posed in Wikipedia, is the notion that species can revert to supposedly more primitive forms over time. And as it's put in the Starset song,
one general law
leading to the advancement of all organic beings
is multiply.
Therein, let the strongest live and the weakest die.
Eventually, a species can become complacent. At that point, an evolution can occur.
It is spiral downwards, signaling an end for that life form.
If I've ever seen this theory proven in reality, it is through fan-made Undertale content I've seen in my day. Imagine showing this to someone struggling in a third world country. How would they react? Because whoever decided that this needed to exist most likely has readily available food, water, and shelter. Now, I will say, on the other hand, Undertale has an extremely talented portion of the fan base. People who not only enjoy Undertale, but add onto it with their own music, games, art, and animations. This is something I see as a great thing. I've said this with the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise as well, that when a series loses its signature quality, or in this case, just isn't able to pump out content as fast as its consumer base can, well, consume it, sometimes the fans will get irritated that they're missing out on more precious content and can want more. As I just mentioned, this can result in some great things, but as we will explore today, this can either get plain bizarre or go as far as abhorrent or demented. Remember, when Moses was away receiving the 10 Commandments from God, the Israelites created and worshipped the golden calf. Okay, this is a bit dramatic, and I don't actually think any of the normal cringe stuff that comes out of Undertale is nearly that bad, but it's still fun to point and laugh at this stuff sometimes. I also want to warn and say this list is gonna get progressively worse, so we'll be having a jolly old time at first, but later on in the video, we're going to be covering some heavy topics. You have officially been warned. With all that being said, let's talk about the weirdest, wackiest, and zaniest that the Undertale multiverse has to offer. Undertale with a Flirting Route is a short series by Smashbit Animations, a channel that makes parody animations based on pop culture. Most of his videos are titled something like, If Blank Was Realistic. Undertale with a Flirting Route is a comedic take on the titular indie game, and it's got some, let's call them stylized visuals. I don't want to make fun of the animation quality too much because I know the animation process is a difficult one, and there are 11 videos, each around 11 minutes long, so I'm assuming any talent here is being stretched just a bit thin. So far, all is well and no harm is done. The issue that at least I have is with the humor.
Can I milk you?
Because love makes your crotch feel gooey.
Bruh. Yes, bruh.
Must resist ghostly booty call. Ah, what the hell?
Goodbye, also doggy.
Legs. I can taste the dairy. Was it good for you?
The comedy in this series is iffy, but it's no big deal, right? Well, keep in mind that Frisk is a child. In the first episode, they joke that Frisk is actually 19 and just suffers from some strange condition.
Small child, you got any idea where you are?
For the record, I'm 19. I'm a grower, not a shower.
Hey, small child, you look like you've got some nice neck.
Again, not small, 19.
Prepare to die, small child.
Ha, that's what you think. I'm 19 years old, mildly attracted to you, and I bet you're an exceptional lover.
But they seem to drop this bit in the following episodes, and they keep calling Frisk, quote, small child.
Hey, small child. You need a date?
Now kiss me with your child lips.
Yes. Joke's on you, Flowey, because the flirts have only made me stronger. I have seen things no child should see before the consenting age of the state or country they live in.
The act of killing an infant.
Well, I'm not legally defined as an infant anymore, but I'm still susceptible to being brutally murdered. My only wish is to love everyone I meet, with the occasional intercourse. Boring. Ugh, come on, Dario. All these toys and nothing to get a small child's mind off their yearning for carnal relations.
Although I personally am going to give benefit of the doubt because these were made 6 years ago, and Dexter, the sole proprietor of Smashbit Animations, seems to be beloved among his fellow creators and fans alike. And I would be lying if I said I didn't at least exhale out of my nose from the humor once or twice.
Easy.
But sadly, I did find myself getting uncomfortable from the concepts behind this little cartoon here. Ultimately, this seems harmless, and also thank you to A Crazy Rabbit for suggesting this one to me. Go subscribe to their channel for awesome animations. To be honest, all this stuff was kind of a theme with Undertale. When it was at its peak of popularity, lots of people made low-quality creations to semi-capitalize on the trend, like Undertale the Musical.
I fell from the light, talker should I find monster genocide?
Undertale the Musical is a garbage fan song made by the same guy who made this.
This attraction is great, so many guys I can read.
I have no apprehension saying that this song is best listened to by the deaf and best watched by the blind, because, I mean, come on, just listen to it.
I fell through a cave on Mount Ebott. I faced an evil
I will say, it's kinda all worth it because the comments of this one are absolutely hilarious. I would just read out some of them here, but the best ones are unironically multi-page long theses on how the song changed their life and is a paradigm-shifting masterpiece of our generation. I also want to point out that since this animation is genocide themed, he decided to follow it up with neutral run and pacifist run themed songs as well. And the animation has vastly improved in quality, although the same cannot be said for the music.
I will not kill them. Befriend Papyrus, be a good human. Neutral run, I will only kill some of them. Kill some but spare the others.
In a game with such a major focus on music, you'd think they'd try a bit harder than just, throwing some autotune on. I mean, the guy had 3 tries to make a good Undertale song. Look at JT Music, he did it on the first go.
Welcome to the underground.
Anyways, all this stuff is cringe, but in the grand scheme of things, all I have to do is turn my computer off and I don't have to look at it anymore. But remember, things are gonna get worse, so let's go another layer deeper in the Undertale abyss. Hey, this is a quick aside to say thank you to IntrepidandBold and UnchangingJimmy for being my channel members. If you want to be like them, click the join button below the video for cool rewards and to support my work. Or don't, because my content is free. I also want to give a quick thank you to BananaGalazy for drawing the stills you see in this video. Undertale is rife with fan-made alternate universes. As I mentioned before, fans can get antsy when official content isn't regularly coming out from their favorite IP, or it performs below their standards, causing fan-made content to be a suitable and popular replacement. This is amplified by a factor of 10 for fans of games like Undertale, because the game itself has such a particular focus on its beautiful visuals, sound design, music, and storytelling, and it can attract a lot of people who appreciate and feel inspired by that sort of content. Plus, Undertale is a more simplistic game in terms of graphics, so it is a lot more easily replicated with its pixelated art style, and a fun yet simple and dynamic RPG combat system to boot. Even if someone isn't willing to create a fan game, the simple graphics of Undertale can sometimes leave a lot to the imagination. Artists and animators alike can take tons of creative liberty with their individual designs. Some take more liberty than others with the AUs they create. There are at least a dozen or so AUs. I mean, there's Underfell, there's Underswap, Mafia Tale, Farm Tale, Craft Tale. Okay, realistically, there are hundreds and hundreds of fan-made AUs, if not thousands. They're not usually my thing. I feel Toby Fox got Undertale right the first time, but I definitely see the appeal of some of these AUs, and the talent behind a decent handful of them is incredible. But every yin has its yang, every rose has its thorn, and every coin has a side with a really handsome guy, and another side with boring buildings or something. Of course, there are some weirder AUs out there. Ones like Farm Tale, an AU where every monster in the underground is a based agriculture enthusiast, and Mafia Tale, an AU where the underground is a city with multiple competing and interconnecting crime families. But then there's the more lesser known AUs. These AUs are typically ones that start as jokes, but gain a more real status after gaining fan art or a more fleshed out story. Ones like FNAF Tale, which explains itself, and Asgore creates an Among Us AU. I want to clarify, this is not an Among Us AU itself. It is a universe where Asgore, king of the monsters, decides to write a fan fiction in which the sussy crewmates and imposters of Among Us mixed with the monsters of the underground. And the story has to do with the consequences and hijinks of him uploading said fanfiction. It has like 21 chapters, and I'm not even joking. All this stuff is fine, albeit a bit strange, but the worst thing I have here is this last category. You see, it's fairly uncommon that an AU will get multiple iterations, or for the same concept to get done twice. And if it does, it's usually one that's more broad, like FNAF and Undertale mixed together, or Minecraft and Undertale mixed together. But I found an AU with 5 versions, and all of them seem to be fully fleshed out AUs, one of which has a planned, fully fledged fan game. Maybe it's an AU where all the characters are humans instead of monsters, or maybe it's an AU where everyone is interested in the music of Imagine Dragons, or maybe it's even porn. It's all porn. It might be hard to hear what I'm saying because it's censored, so just imagine under heat, under fuck, under lust, under tail, and under her tail. The last of which, from my knowledge, is getting an entire fan game. I believe the concept behind the game is that instead of a mercy option, you get the option to flirt. And that's as far as I care to go. I don't think we need an explanation as to why this AU concept is so popular, but come on guys, there are 5 medium to large scale AUs dedicated to dancing the devil's polka with every monster in the underground. It's such a shame because the characters in the underground are so wholesome. I mean, people are allowed to do whatever they want as long as they're not directly harming anyone, regardless of how much I think it's unhealthy and stupid, but I mean, come on, chill out fellas. Luckily, these works of fiction are merely a drop in the bucket when it comes to AUs, and they will have no long-lasting impact or be directly harmful to anyone. But there is one AU that I can think of where this is not the case. So join me as we go another layer deeper into PJ's daycare. If you recognized what I meant when I said PJ's daycare at the end of the last section, it's probably too late for you and you're experiencing stomach ulcers as I speak. But for the uninitiated, lucky collection of my viewers who hasn't had the displeasure of hearing about PJ's daycare, let me ruin your day, week, month, year even. PJ's daycare is an Undertale AU in which, in the simplest terms, a bunch of alternate versions of Sans are aged down and plopped into a daycare.
Welcome to Paper Jam's Daycare, where PJ takes care of kinder versions of lots of Sanses.
Alternate versions of Sans don't just make up the cast of children, they also are the adults in this universe as well. Just assume that any sentient living being in this reality is Sans. The AU came to fruition through artist Blog the Great Rouge on Tumblr. Essentially, people could comment on their posts and they could respond as characters in universe, while also progressing the story, so fans could feel like they're a part of this universe. This concoction led to an environment that seemed to attract a lot of younger fans. This is all pretty dumb in my opinion, but it seems pretty innocuous at this point. The issues begin to arise when we start to look at some of the content the comic consisted of. Here's some examples.
I'm gonna marry you when I grow up. How about you guys get married now, Fresh? Yes, great idea. Let's go get married right now. Arrow, you'll be my best man.
Kid Fresh suddenly grows up to an adult. How would PJ react? What? Oh no, this is weird. Why is he hot?
Can we get married now?
Hey PJ, are you actually gonna marry Fresh at such a young age? Or are you just playing along? What? I'm not doing either of those things. You're the ones that are encouraging him.
Go wear your wedding dress!
In real life, if a child or toddler says that they want a relationship with an older individual, it's typically dissuaded by a parent or guardian in some way, because it can lead to an unhealthy mindset for a growing mind. But let's go ahead and look at how it's handled in PJ's daycare.
Fresh, we talked about this. I told you that you need to grow up first, and you agreed.
I changed my mind. I wanna marry you now.
I'm watching you. Marriage isn't necessary as long as we love each other, don't you think?
You love me?
Now, what kind of silly question is that? Of course I do.
Excuse me? Wait until you're older? If this character were serious when they said that, then that would just make this just with a wholesome filter, I guess. You could argue that as a child, Fresh Sans wouldn't have an understanding of romantic love and assumes that the more platonic love they feel for a parental figure must be what that is. And that's what the story is about. But even if that were the case, which I believe is not due to things we'll be talking about later on, it's still handled so poorly, and throughout all of this, it's very obvious that the comments were egging on this kind of behavior. There are so many examples of super poorly handled topics in the series. If you want a more comprehensive view of this, go and watch the video by Streamline Workshop. But to sum up, this safe for work comic includes borderline grooming, child marriage, jokes of the main caretaker being a pedophile, and suicide shaming. But this was merely the beginning. Now, the content coming up is going to include some very intense and sensitive topics, so if you are on the younger side or easily disturbed, I would suggest clicking off this video now. With that out of the way, let's talk about the depravity of Blog the Great Rouge. Information is a bit scarce as far as I can tell on exactly where the art comes from, so take some of the context I'm about to give with a grain of salt regarding when and how these things took place. Blog the Great Rouge didn't exactly continue PJ's daycare, but I believe they continued making comics with some of the associated characters, and multiple of them were not safe for work. To fulfill the sick fantasies most likely in the mind of the creator, they drew and wrote comics romanticizing suicide and abuse, as well as children and incest. These disgusting concepts were not merely implied but straight up drawn and shown in the panels. Storylines were included in which one character assaults and rapes another and then realizes that they're okay with it because they ended up liking the person that did it. I can't even count the sheer amount of reasons why this alone is extremely perverted and wrong. And this is merely one of the many demented things that are romanticized by the creator of these comics. I heard somewhere that they apologized, but for one, shut up scumbag, and for two, I cannot find it anywhere. I know that they did respond, but it was essentially just a paragraph of deflecting. Luckily, the community came together in the end to rally against the depravity, but sadly, this content was most likely exposed to a lot of younger Undertale fans, teaching them incredibly wrong things about relationships and potentially scarring them for life. We can only take solace in knowing that Blog the Great Rouge no longer uploads content and has had their non-deserved platform taken away, so they can no longer potentially harm any children and spread their garbage. Now, you'd think this is the worst it gets, and it may be, but I have one last story for us that may just take the cake, or should I say, take the cookie. Evamedes was a semi-popular fan artist who had a particular affinity for drawing Undertale. It seems this artist has gone private on all socials, so it's a bit hard to find art from them that's confirmed to be drawn by them. But after a use of the Wayback Machine, it seems that they made a lot of cringe art, albeit with a lot of talent. The cringiest of which was Frisk X Sans Shipping, otherwise known as Fran's art. Now, while this art is terrible in terms of content and the concept of Fran's is abysmal, if I were to cover every artist that had bad or problematic fan art in the Undertale fandom, we would be here until the horns of judgment blared. So while I despise this stuff, it's just another Tuesday for an Undertale fan. So on May 10th, 2017, Evamedes was attending a comics convention in which a fan was kind enough to offer them a cookie. It actually was a cookie, so that wasn't the problem. Later on during the day, the artist decided to take a bite of the cookie. The cookie had a needle inside of it. Luckily, the needle merely pierced their tongue and did not make its way down their throat or result in any detrimental damage. The injured artist made a post on a social media platform called Plurk. They took it a lot more well than most probably would in a potential assassination attempt, and this is where the official information seems to end, and everything else in this story is either not fully confirmed or just speculation. When the story first broke, multiple people took to the internet to spread the story, and it seemed people were desperate to fill in the gaps with their theories. You see, Evamedes was actually a Taiwanese fan artist, and it was harder to get information closer to the West. This all led to the idea that the reason this was done was because the artist created this Fran's fan art, causing this story to become a go-to for those either defending those wanting to create the art or antagonizing the Undertale community as a whole. The initial posts breaking the story to general audiences did attempt to make it clear that it wasn't certain that the art the creator made was what led to the incident, although this concept seemed to become gospel to those who weren't entirely versed in the situation. For a while, the story seemed to be widely accepted at face value, but in recent times an extra layer has been added to the story. You see, Eventually, people more aware of the details of the situation realized that we don't exactly know the culprit's reasoning for doing this, and they began to speculate for a while. The Franz theory, as I've dubbed it, was seemingly the leading one for a while, but it seems that another theory has potentially popped up. Do you remember when I briefly mentioned that Avamades has seemingly privated all of their social media? Well, this apparently doesn't have anything to do with the needle cookie situation. You see right now their bio on Twitter simply reads, "I have no idea." But around mid-2021, it read something like this: "Learned from my past, moving on. I decided to reboot my social media accounts, only for myself some space to breathe. I apologize for everything I have done." And to be quite frank, it is incredibly difficult to find any damning evidence against Avamades, but there have been a lot of accusations thrown their way. Again, none of these have been backed up with apparent evidence, but with the words that were left in their Twitter bio, I believe these accusations could have some ground to stand on. Apparently, Avamades was accused of scamming and ghosting their friends out of their money, and emotional blackmail, as well as even more career-ending accusations like multiple accounts of sexually harassing minors and animal abuse through neglect, leading to the alleged death of 14 pet birds. I know this story is about a cookie, but it has so many layers, it's starting to remind me of a cake. That was dumb, that was dumb, that was dumb, that was dumb. I'll be honest, after all the information I could find has been laid out, I'm having trouble thinking on how to feel about this whole situation. On one hand, someone attempted genuine murder, and this part of the story is the only confirmed and real thing we are certain of, and that's awful on its own. Whether it was an act performed unprovoked, malice brought up by stupid fan art, or a poor attempt at vigilante justice against an also disturbed individual, it was, of course, not the answer. But I feel there is something to learn from the story, that when drama breaks or tea is spilled, spreading unsupported evidence as fact can cause issues. Whenever I look up this story, I see post after post talking about how crazy it is, that this all started because of some stupid fan art, that some Undertale fans go way too far, causing this to become an example of insane and strict fan bases, all from a couple of Twitter and Reddit posts that speculated at the idea. So it's kinda hard to give a definitive take on this story because of all the unsupported evidence and what seems to be misinformation. I will just say, what the culprit did is despicable, regardless of context. This would not be the way to handle the situation in any way, shape, or form. And if Avamades really did all of the things in which they are seemingly accused, while I obviously do not wish harm upon them, I'm glad that any platform they had was taken away. I hope this retelling of the story was able to bring even a little bit of clarity to those who have heard the story before. And this leads me to my last segment. Undertale's fanbase gets a lot of flack, and sometimes, a lot of times, it's pretty fair criticism. The fanbase is full of disturbing fan art and strange content, but I mean, so does every community. It's simply natural that when a large group of people come together, some of them are going to be abnormal or even abhorrent. While it can fulfill our natural morbid curiosity to hear about these people, their actions, and their consequences, it's important to remember one does not represent all. The Undertale community is incredibly talented, as I mentioned before, and can create some amazing, monumental works in regard to the massive IP that is Undertale. The entire message behind Toby Fox's 2015 masterpiece is simple, regardless of how complex the game itself is. That being that words are better than violence. Undertale takes the traditional concept of a role-playing game and flips it on its head. Where you would typically fight and kill monsters, you are encouraged to simply talk to them, getting rewarded with the most content and objectively the best series of events and ending the game has to offer through words and kind gestures, as opposed to the typical acts of violence a game would encourage. And this is coming from the guy who has been obsessed with Sekiro, a game in which you literally kill. So, I encourage fans and detractors of Undertale alike to keep the message of the original work in mind. No matter how much you love or hate Undertale or its fanbase and fan works, that is the intent of the original creator, and those who take the initial love and kindness intended to come from the game and twist it into something wrong and horrid should not represent the rest of the fanbase. And even though Undertale is special in the senses I just described, that should go for most other fanbases as a whole. So, with all that being said, this was the sins of the Undertale community. Thank you for watching.